Hello, welcome to the Real Estate Regroup Show. I am your host, LJ Walker, a real estate investor helping you realize your dream of owning a home or investing in one. Today, I want to address, did you know that you can lose your home to squatters? Yes, it's called adverse possession. Adverse possession is when one person possesses property owned by someone else, and then they go in and try and take title over it. This can happen when the possessor has been inside of the property for a number of years, normally 7 to 20. It really depends on which state it's in or which country it's in. Renters are not considered adverse possessors of rented property, no matter how long they possess it. That's something totally different. Now, normally, adverse possessors do it publicly, not in secret. People have to know or must see that you are in possession of the property. Some of you may be aware of a man who was able to purchase property for $16 by using adverse possession. His community fought against it, and the house was taken away from him. I think it was done because he did not do it publicly. He did it secretly. The other thing is that it has to be continuous possession, meaning you can't be in the house or living in the property for 1 year, go away for 2 years, and then come back. You have to be there year after year after year. Also, as an adverse possessor, they can't share the property with anyone else. They have to pretty much be living there alone. Alone meaning just themselves and family, meaning a husband, a wife, and kids. Not a husband, wife, kids, his brother, wife, and kids. That would be considered two families or two people. Okay. Now, some of you may be wondering, why not try and find the owner of these properties, these abandoned buildings? Sometimes, to be quite honest, it's not so easy to do. Even if you're in a city and state where they do have a database and where they try to keep up with who owns what property, the thing is that sometimes people will change phone numbers, emails. Sometimes people really do disappear. And it's not easy for people to keep in touch or to keep up to date as far as who owns the property. Or sometimes they have who owns it, but the phone number and the email is outdated. Also, you also have places where the tax assessor's office does not do a good job as to saying who is the owner of what property. Right now, I'm actually experiencing a situation where the tax assessor feels that there's gaps in my title. So I have to do extra digging, and my title insurance company, they have to do extra digging to try and fill in the gap so that my name can be on property that I bought. Then also I had another property where the tax assessor did not update who the owner was. It was recorded in the deed, but for whatever reason, it wasn't transferred over to the tax assessor's office. So they kept sending my taxes to the previous owner instead of giving it to me. Another thing that happens is sometimes a building may be owned by an organization, and the management in that organization changes. The old management may not have told the new management. Sometimes that happens. Some of you may know that one of my managers died. So whatever information he had, it may not necessarily be easy for a new manager to just pick up and run along. We do have documentation, but it's possible that certain things are just not documented, so the new person may not know. There have been cases like that. Churches are known for that. Sometimes companies go out of business. One of the people who I've done business with who cheated me, he got so many people coming after him that he decided to shut down. So whatever property he had under that business name, well, that's kind of up in the air right now. And then you have other instances, which I've mentioned before in other podcasts, where sometimes the owner is dead and they can't find any relatives or anyone else that's willing to take over the property or that want to take over the property. Because I've also heard of instances where a family member bought property, they found the next of kin, but the next of kin doesn't want to have anything to do with the property. That happens too. So when that happens, that sort of leaves room for people who want to move in, squat, or use adverse possession. Let me give you a little background history of something that came about. And I also want to bring you up to what has made current history. Okay, let's first deal with what happened back in the 70s, right here in New York City. There were many landlords that walked away from their old buildings. These were like tenement buildings. These buildings, they slid into vacancy and rot. Then on top of that, some of them actually caught a fire. So what happened? We had a homeless problem. Homeless people, they decided to look for shelter. So they took shelter in many of these vacant buildings. They started squatting. The city did take over these buildings in 1978 and 1989, but they didn't do anything to it. They didn't fix it up. They didn't rent it out. They didn't do anything. So more and more squatters just moved in and lived there. They fixed up the building. Some of them, not all, some of them still lived in squalor. But many of them, particularly in the Lower East Side, in an area called Alphabet City, Avenue A, B, C, and D, that area, many of those people, they were engineers, plumbers, construction workers who couldn't find a job. And then on top of that, back in the 70s, there was also inflation. So in order to take care of their families, in order to stay as healthy as possible, many of them moved into these structures, gutted them out themselves, and performed their own repairs. Well, in the 90s, what happened is many developers started to see some potential. Buildings and neighborhoods that they once turned their nose up on and said, oh, there's no hope here. When they saw that these squatters turned that area around to a certain extent, they said, oh, let's buy the building. So the city sold the building to the developers, and then the developers, of course, turned around and filed eviction against the squatters. The squatters fought back, and now, as of today's date, it was a long, hard battle. The squatters now own those buildings that they fixed up down in the Lower East Side. So, seeing this, Many other developers who went into other neighborhoods such as Harlem, what they decided to do is they said, okay, we know what, we're not going to go into eviction court. It takes too long, it costs too much money. So here's what we're going to do. Whatever property we find, we are going to pay those people to move. And what some of them actually did was hire some of them as supers or as security guards for those buildings. Some of those buildings were multifamily and apartment buildings, so they were able to give the person that lived there all those years, they should know the ins and outs of the building that they were living in. So they figured they'd keep them around. So they either, one, kept them around, or if they were really too high on drugs, which unfortunately some of them were, then they would just give them a little money and have them move out. Because that way was most efficient time-wise and cost-wise as well. Moving forward to today, many of you have heard about California Homes for Moms. California Homes for Moms, similar situation. There is a difference though. Let me give you a little background for those of you who are not familiar. California Homes for Moms are a group of homeless women and housing advocate organizations that believe that housing is a human right and the human right should be over profit. In the area of Oakland, California, which is the base, there are a lot of abandoned property over there. They spoke with one particular developer, one particular owner of these properties that was abandoned for years, and that organization would not sell to the housing advocate organization. So two of the moms said, you know what, forget it. We tried to do everything right. We're tired of living in the street. We're just going to break in. So they broke into one of the homes and started living there. But now see, they were only there for a few months. They weren't there for 7 years. The owners sold it actually to another company. And then that company filed for eviction to evict them. At first they won the eviction case. But then the advocacy group took that company back to court. And now they actually have a settlement. They're actually going to work together to remodel that home. And I don't remember if they're selling it to the women, but they're actually going to let them live there. Meanwhile, the developer is going to take a income. I think, to be honest, that it's a good idea, but the way they went about it, I don't necessarily agree with. I would not have liked for somebody to break into my home that I own, whether I was living there or not. That's number one. But I understand where they're coming from, because you do have many developers, many other investors who will buy property, they won't fix it up, they'll leave it dilapidated, and they just have it sitting there, making it an eyesore for the neighborhood, dragging down property values for everybody else who does keep up their home. And then they'll wait until that area becomes, let's say, an opportunity zone, and then jack up the price real high. That's what people do. What I think would be best is for California to adopt what Baltimore is doing and what Detroit is doing, and that is allow people to buy property for cheap, or if they see a property that is an eyesore, that is dragging down property values, that is turning an area into a ghetto, they should take that property Of course, find that properly, because sometimes when property is located in certain areas, the people who go out and give fines don't go out that often. They should, and they should also stipulate a rule. Whoever buys property, they have 6 months to a year to start turning that property around. This way you don't have investors who will go in and then just, bring down a neighborhood because they want to hold on until they get profit. Yes, it's their right, but in a sense, their right is fringing upon other people. You're fringing upon the neighbors in the area that are trying to keep their property values up. You're also infringing upon the homeless people who want a place to live, and they can afford it if you go through one of these housing advocates, because the housing advocate can get the grant to purchase the money and to help as far as redoing the building. Working together will make a better community. That's basically my 2 cents on that area. And I will move on. Listen, adverse possession is not something that's just here in the United States. It also exists in other countries. One country that I'm quite familiar with is Jamaica. Many of you know that my family is based there. That's where we're from. Now, in Jamaica, the way it works is that if a person squats on your property for 12 years, then they can apply for adverse possession. Here's what they have to do, though. They have to prove that they've actually spent money on the property, such as putting up fencing and doing landscaping. Now, what have I told you? Curb appeal is very important. I've said this in the past. And squatters are attracted, or they normally make assumptions that if a place is boarded up and if it looks real tacky, like it came from the House of Frankenstein, that they can go in, move in, and set up shop. That's why it's important, even if you don't live on a property, to make sure that the outside looks nice. Another thing that, I digress, moving along, another thing that you have to have in Jamaica is that 2 people must know that you took that property and you made it your permanent residence. You also must bring a certified copy of the title or information that's, easily obtained. You have to show that you've made attempts to locate the registered owner for that property. And you also must show a certificate payment of taxes. Once you do all of those things, then you can claim to be the rightful owner of property. So you see, folks, don't think that you can just buy property, leave it, and everything is going to be all right. You can't do that. Some of you have bought retirement properties, not just in other states, but in other countries. You need to look at the laws. Get yourself a good lawyer, and you need to maintain your property, because I'm telling you, your property can be taken away from you. All right? Okay, folks, that's all I have for you tonight. Hopefully the information that I have shared will help you make smart financial moves. Feel free to pass this along. Remember, each one, reach one, teach one. Bye for now. Until next time, have a good night.